Joe Burrow is the most difficult player to evaluate in Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues. Find out why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Pro Football Focus, Yahoo, and Behind the Steel Curtain. On today's show, we're going to be discussing the players that are the most difficult to evaluate in your dynasty leagues. And we're going to start with Joe Burrow, who I just can't figure out as QB6 in my dynasty leagues. I love watching the player, but where should he be ranked, Kate?
Here's the thing, Marcus. Obviously, you look at his performance when he is fully healthy, right? And you would think that when he is fully healthy, that absolutely fully justifies his position as QB6 in Dynasty League startups. But we're going to see, I think, we have the potential to see a very different season coming out of Joe Burrow because, Marcus, there's a lot in flux here in the Cincinnati Bengals offense. First of all, is the departure of their offensive coordinator, which we know can have big impacts on the quarterback position, especially for, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe Burrow's never played with another offensive
I
coordinator
don't believe so, no.
with the Cincinnati Bengals. Like that could be huge in and of itself. Making those adjustments between offenses can be a hurdle. Not to say that that's a long time hurdle, but it can be a hurdle for some. You also have the potential departure of T. Higgins, who, obviously is going to hit free agency. There's been talk that he could return to Cincinnati, but I've said it before. I think asking him to return to Cincinnati, even if the Bengals are willing to match a price that he can get elsewhere, you're paying him to be the 1B. You are not paying him to be your top wide receiver. And we know wide receivers in this league, they want the ball, baby. They don't want to be the 1B. They want to be the 1A, especially a guy with T. Higgins talent. I find it so hard to believe that he wouldn't want to explore free agency. Maybe they give him the franchise tag. I don't know. But it just feels like there's a lot of question marks. And then you go back to Joe Burrow's health, which, not to call him injury prone, we never like to use that phrase to describe players because it hasn't been the same types of injuries over and over again, but availability is super key. And, I don't know. Joe Burrow, he's a tough one to crack, baby.
Yeah, and there's also some issues on the offensive line. Jonah Williams, the right tackle, he is scheduled to become a free agent. I even look at this beyond just 2024. It doesn't feel like they're going to be able to keep Jamar Chase and T. Higgins long term. They might be able to franchise Higgins for a year and then let him walk, but that part of it doesn't worry me as much as the injury history does, because it's really extensive now between the torn ACL as a rookie, the calf injury that he had this year. Now he's got the hand injury. That always scares me when you have a quarterback that has a hand injury. And he's always not really been much of a rushing threat. So you're getting most of your production through the air. And if he's going to be losing weapons and the injuries are going to start to rack up, it makes me nervous. I love the player, Kate. He's absolutely amazing to watch. I was just talking to somebody today about the San Francisco game that he had this year, where might have been the best quarterback game of the year. I mean, completely dialed in, shredded that 49ers defense. Easily the best game that the Bengals played all season long. A couple of weeks later, he gets hurt. We don't see him again. Right now, he's being drafted as QB6, just behind Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson, but ahead of Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence. I'm not saying that he should be all the way at the bottom of that tier, but I got to be honest, like QB6 feels a little rich to me, but I also know there's as soon as the season starts and he starts playing, we're going to be ranking him as a top 5 quarterback every single week. So this is why it's so hard for me to figure out what to do with Joe Burrow.
I mean, you look at his PFF grades, and these are what they consider stable metrics per PFF since let me see, 2020. Okay. Since 2020, his standard drop back grade, 96th percentile, grade from a clean pocket, which can be very predictive of their success as a passer, 95th percentile among quarterbacks. On plays without play action, 98th percentile, throws at or beyond the sticks, 98th percentile. Like, Joe Burrow is a very good quarterback, and that is not at all what we're questioning here. It's just, can his value as a fantasy asset be, overcome all of these different obstacles that I think Joe Burrow is going to have to overcome this year and potentially beyond?
Yeah. So where do you feel comfortable ranking him? Because I'm going to keep mentioning this. Quarterback 6 in Dynasty right now. Is that about right, or what are you thinking?
So you mentioned that tier of players that have been drafted right behind. And I think the way that you phrased this was, I think this is an appropriate tier for Joe Burrow. My question is, does he deserve to be at the top of that tier? He's 27 years old. So like Justin Herbert, for instance, 2 years younger than Joe Burrow. And, obviously there's a lot influx here with the LA Chargers and, questions about what this offense is going to look like under Jim Harbaugh. Like, again, a million questions, but you look at Anthony Richardson, 21 years old, also has health concerns, but a ton of upside there. You look at Justin Fields, also a ton of question marks, but a ton of upside. Like, I'm just not sure if Joe Burrow should be leading the pack, though that does feel like the appropriate tier for him to be ranked in.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really curious to see what this offense looks like as we go into the summer. Do they bring back T. Higgins? I wouldn't even be surprised, Kate, if they draft a receiver kind of early. One of the things this offense they just don't have is speed. I wouldn't be shocked if they move on from T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, or maybe they try to franchise Higgins and let go of Boyd so they don't lose all this talent at one time. I also think the tight end position could use an upgrade. I'm not sure how they accomplish that. Maybe they try to get a tight end in free agency. We shall see. But I fully expect this offense to look completely different by the time we get to May and June. And maybe then we can start to reevaluate where we are with Joe Burrow. All right, Kay, let's move to some receivers that we have some questions about going into the spring. We will get to Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers next. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder and the 2024 Nissan Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Kate, I want to mention Christian Watson to you because I was going through some Dynasty League ADP this morning, and I saw that Christian Watson, wide receiver 30, 56 overall in terms of the ADP. And I don't know how to feel about it because on one hand, how many 6'4" receivers that are 24 years old that can run a 4.3 that are tied to what we think is going to be an elite quarterback are out there. We've seen the upside, right? And we really haven't even seen it with a healthy or with Jordan Love playing. What could he potentially look like in 2024, 2025 and beyond? Well, we also have this nagging hamstring injury where he just can't stay on the field for more than a few games at a time. I have no idea what to do with Christian Watson. And for me, he's somebody that I've been just avoiding in my dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I actually have a pretty similar sentiment here. So, you look at his involvement when he's been on the field, and it's really hard to kind of gauge his actual involvement for a full game because even when he's playing, Marcus feels like he's always leaving with injury, which is so so hard. Averaging 5.2 targets per game, but again, leaving a lot of those games early. He's only played 23 games in his career, which, Marcus, I'll remind you, is only 7 more games than Rashee Rice has played in his regular season career. I'm just saying. One of the most valuable traits here is availability, and Rashee Rice has that down. I'm just here to say, but all that being said, he's got 12 receiving touchdowns, despite the fact that he's been on the field in a very limited fashion. He's averaging 15 yards per reception, which among wide receivers with 100 plus targets over the last 2 years, that ranks 14th among those wide receivers. He's very efficient when he's on the field. But here's the thing. I don't think he's ever, if you're in a standard league, I think Christian Watson holds a lot more value. So standard being a non-PPR league. If you are in a half PPR or especially a full PPR league, I don't think Christian Watson's efficiency and his lack of consistent availability is doing you any favors. Like, I'll forego the upside of Christian Watson in leagues where I'm being rewarded for points per reception because I just don't know that there's going to be enough to go around to make Christian Watson's upside worth it. I don't know that there's going to be enough to garnish a safe floor. Now, we saw this year when he's not on the field, they have no problem finding other receiving options. And I think that it's kind of an eye-opening thing to see Jordan Love executing this offense. I think he's going to be better when Christian Watson is on the field, but I don't know that Christian Watson has really carved himself out a spot as this top receiver. And we saw this year, this is a very competitive receiving group and a very talented and deep receiving group that they have, albeit young.
I'll be honest, I just don't know what to do with any of these Packers receivers. Not only Christian Watson, but Jaden Reed being drafted as wide receiver 26. Dontavian Wicks is somebody who played well at the end of the year. Bo Melton even got some targets. They have the 2 tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft. To me, it just feels like this entire offense outside of Jordan Love and Aaron Jones is really in flux. And we're just kind of waiting for things to, settle down and find out which guys that Jordan Love is really going to trust in this offense. And it makes it really hard to go all in on 1 or 2 of these players because maybe the idea for Matt LaFleur is we're just going to use a bunch of different weapons and you're never going to be able to key on one player. I think that's a good strategy in theory. It hardly works that way. Eventually, when you get into big games, you've got to find like the 2 guys that you trust and just target the crap out of them. I just don't know who that's going to be yet.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jordan Love knows who it's going to be yet because he hasn't had the opportunity to play with all of these receivers healthy and on the field at the same time long enough to really establish any kind of pattern, at least for us. Maybe we get some tips in the offseason. We hear that Jordan Love's working out with one of the wide receivers and not the other. Like maybe we can read through the weeds there. But I think right now the answer to which, Packers wide receiver you want to roster is probably whichever one's cheapest.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, Jaden Reed, obviously one of the top of the list here, but Christian Watson, I don't know that his price tag has dropped low enough for me to invest in based on A, the volatility, B, the injury concerns. I mean, there was one game, Marcus, that Christian Watson left, and I'm having trouble remembering which game this was because there have been so many. But when he was exiting the game, they give that injury designation there. It said like Christian Watson questionable with concussion, back, and rib injuries, and hamstring. It was. I'm paraphrasing here, but in short, it was a disaster, and that tweet summed up the entire season for Christian Watson for me. So
yeah, I think it was back, neck, hamstring, finger.
like I giggled, and not to say I'm giggling at his pain, but I giggled because how?
You might as well just put body, right? I mean,
Body.
yeah.
Ouchies.
I have no idea what to do with Christian Watson. I'm going to name some of the receivers that are being drafted behind him. And this is what makes it hard because when I look at these players, none of them make me all that excited to say, absolutely, I'm banging the table. I'm taking them over Christian Watson. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 31.
Ugh.
Amari Cooper, wide receiver 32.
I'll take Amari Cooper all day.
Yeah, I lean that way as well. Now, Amari, same kind of thing, right? Like Amari has been one of these players over the course of his career where a lot of different nagging injuries, doesn't miss a ton of games, did miss a couple this year, is 29 years old. Mike Evans, wide receiver 33.
Mike Evans.
Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 34.
Terry McLaurin.
Josh Downs, wide receiver 35.
That's where we're getting interesting. I'll still probably take Josh Downs.
Christian Kirk, wide receiver 36.
Christian Kirk.
Chris Godwin, wide receiver 37.
Chris Godwin.
Jamison Williams, wide receiver 38.
Let's go, J-Mo.
Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 39.
Deontay Johnson.
We're going to keep going. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 40.
Tier break.
Yep, I agree. That is certainly a tier break for me. I probably would have Watson a little bit higher because once you start getting into Ridley 29, Cooper 29, Evans 30, Terry McLaurin 28, I don't know if I want to be on the downslope there. I think I would rather just gamble on the age, but Watson, really, really tough player to figure out right now in your dynasty leagues. Another receiver, this one a little bit of an aging receiver who I didn't mention, Stefon Diggs, or age 30, could be on the move this offseason. Kate, what do we think about Stefon Diggs moving forward? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move that I can make that'll take my business to the next level? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team that you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have this many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats right now and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, that process is so quick and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Did the game go to timeout? Time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That is ordering in time. 2-minute warning. You got it. That is your cue to order in. Whenever the game clock stops, that's the time to order in with DoorDash. Order pizza, wings, sodas, burgers, or even just buns on DoorDash and get it all delivered without missing the game. Get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all the tailgate gear on DoorDash, and then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. That is 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. On today's show, we are breaking down the players that are the hardest for us to evaluate in our Dynasty leagues. And Kate, we are up to your guy, Stefon Diggs, wide receiver 27. Why is he so difficult for you to figure out?
There are a million reasons it is so hard for me to figure out what to do with Stefon Diggs. So first of all, there is the situation, and Marcus, maybe you can share a little bit about this. Tell me about the likelihood of Stefon Diggs being a Buffalo Bill in 2024.
It's really hard because it's difficult to move him because of how much guaranteed money is still left on his deal. But if we kind of just big picture some stuff, if you remember the game against the Bengals last year in the playoffs, him and Josh Allen got into a little argument on the sideline. Stefon Diggs didn't show up to some of the offseason work. There was some stuff about whether he was going to show up to training camp or not. Goes in, starts the year off extremely hot, right? Extremely good. A bunch of 100-yard receiving games. And then in the second half of the season, absent. And then in the biggest game of the year against the Chiefs, doesn't really do anything. First play of the game, he actually fumbles. The Bills were lucky to recover the fumble there. And then on the big throw that Josh Allen had down the sideline, he drops it. Buffalo is kind of a no-nonsense town when it comes to their football team. They don't like to put up with extracurricular activities, is I guess the best way to put it. I've got to believe that Sean McDermott, who is very much into the culture of the Buffalo Bills, is going to want to move on from Stefon Diggs. I don't know how they do that, though. I don't know if they have to eat some money. I don't know if they try to get him to agree to a new deal on a new team. But I would say if I'm betting right now, I don't think he's a Buffalo Bill in 2024.
So that is the first big question mark, right? This is a situation that I think is going to continue to evolve all offseason long. And I don't know that we're going to have an answer here for a long time about what is going to happen with Stefon Diggs and his future with the Bills. And, it's largely dependent on how the Bills can figure out how to move on from him as to whether or not another team is going to be willing to buy in to the value of Stefon Diggs. Now, we also have the situation, you mentioned the very hot start for the year to Stefon Diggs. This is actually the second season that Stefon Diggs got off to a blazing hot start. So in the first 6 weeks of the season, over the last 2 years combined, Stefon Diggs has averaged a incredible 24 fantasy points per game in full PPR
It's
formats,
ridiculous.
which is ridiculous. In the 12-game span, those 6 games in each season combined, Stefon Diggs has totaled just under 100 catches, just under 1,300 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns in 12 games. Like that, he was producing at a ridiculous rate. Now, in both of those seasons, we've actually seen a big time decline in his second half of the season production. You look at fantasy points per game, that 24 fantasy points per game that he has averaged through the first 6 weeks of the last 2 seasons drops to 14 fantasy points per game in full PPR formats. We saw a huge drop off in his touchdown production, in his yards per reception, dropped from 12.7 yards per reception this year through the first 6 weeks down to 9.7 yards per reception. I'm having trouble figuring out what it is exactly that's perpetuating these second half drop offs. And I do think that identifying a root cause of that lack of production is also probably going to be key to your evaluation of him in Dynasty. And then there's the age factor, which we haven't even talked about. He's an aging wide receiver. Like all of that combined, it's very hard to rank him low because you know the upside, but it's really hard to buy into Stefon Diggs as a potential value when there are this many question marks on board.
And I think there's a really good chance that wherever he gets traded to, he's going to just get a million targets. And we know how valuable targets are. So, I mean, there's a dozen teams in the league that could use his services and instantly give him 140 targets. And he's right back to being a top 20 wide receiver every week. But I also wonder, Kate, I think as he's starting to age a little bit, what you're seeing is he just has a hard time playing through injuries. And I think that's what happened this year. I think there was some pretty clearly some foot things going on with Stefon Diggs. He's just unable to produce when he's dealing with a minor or even a somewhat major injury. And that's not uncommon for players as they age. So we'll see with Stefon Diggs. He is 30 years old. He is still under contract with the Buffalo Bills. But I don't think that's going to be the case for very much longer.
Yeah, makes it very, very hard to figure out what in the world to do. And Marcus, I think in general, so the question is not like really where we're ranking these players in Dynasty, but like all of the players that we've talked about today, if I'm in a Dynasty startup draft, they're probably just players I'm passing on. Not
Yeah.
they're I don't want to deal with the question mark unless they fall well past the ranges that we've discussed them in. I think I'm probably out on all these guys, at least in a Dynasty startup for the time being.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for tuning in and downloading the podcast where you can get the Locked On Dynasty podcast wherever you get your podcast. On Monday's show, we are breaking down the Pro Bowl. No, we're not doing that. I promise. We're not breaking down the Pro Bowl in the skills game, dodgeball. We're going to have a lot of Dynasty content. We're going to start some team previews soon. We're going to start some draft profiles soon as we get you ready for the 2024 NFL draft. So make sure you are checking those out. Go check out the YouTube channel. We post videos every single day over there. Kate does an awesome job with the shorts. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Have a great weekend, and we will see you right back here on Monday.